Usually, deciding to get your own apartment instead of like living with roommates, that's seen as a huge milestone of financial
Oh,
success.
absolutely. It's the dream, right.
Right. I mean, you trade the cost of rent for the sheer joy of, well, never arguing over whose turn it is to empty the dishwasher again.
Yeah, the ultimate expression of adult independence.
Exactly. But what if your desire for a private kitchen is actually like a diagnostic tool proving your soul is fundamentally flawed?
Wow. Okay, that completely upends how modern society measures success.
Yeah, it does. I mean, what if your ability to seamlessly share a living space was the literal dividing line between eternal salvation and total spiritual failure?
Right, because we are taught to build our own castles, but, the philosophical landscape we are stepping into today treats that desire for a private castle as a spiritual sickness.
Which is wild.
Mhm.
So, today on the deep dive, our mission is to explore a highly specific, totally fascinating text written by an author named Shuafeng.
Right, and it details the core beliefs of a movement called Lifechanyuan.
Yes, and the central argument we are unpacking is precisely that, collective living is not just some socioeconomic lifestyle choice. It is an absolute, non-negotiable requirement for spiritual salvation.
Yeah, the text constructs this incredibly detailed framework of how human nature operates, and it does so by blending ancient spiritual traditions with very modern socioeconomic terminology.
But real quick, before we go any further, just a quick note on how we are approaching this. The source material leans heavily on some very charged political terminology.
Specifically communism and capitalism.
Right. And it weaves those together with strict religious dogma. So as your guides on this deep dive, we are not endorsing any of these viewpoints, nor are we taking sides politically or religiously.
Absolutely not. Our goal is simply to impartially report on the original text and, analyze the provocative architecture of this specific worldview.
Right. We are looking at the internal logic of Shuafeng's argument. The goal is to understand how the text reaches its conclusions, regardless of how any of us might personally view the intersection of politics and theology. Okay, let's unpack this, because the foundational definitions in this text are striking right from the jump.
They really are.
The source equates collective life directly with communist principles and individual life with capitalist principles.
Right, so the text defines collective life as a mode of existence where, many people live together sharing resources and labor according to communist principles.
Okay.
And then individual life is defined as existing independently, basically accumulating and protecting your own resources according to capitalist principles.
Wait, hold on. Let's talk about how it categorizes the traditional family, because the text labels family life as fundamentally capitalist in nature, and I have to push back on the logic there.
Oh, I knew you would. It's a tough pill to swallow.
I mean, how can a family be capitalist? Parents literally pour resources into their children for free, often sacrificing their own comfort without expecting any financial return.
Right.
That feels deeply communal to me. So how does the text justify calling that capitalist?
Well, it looks at where you draw the boundary of your generosity. So think of the traditional nuclear family as a closed loop.
A closed loop.
Internally, within the walls of your house, you share resources. You operate like a mini commune with your spouse and children.
Right. Making dinner, sharing the TV.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But externally, you are hoarding resources, wealth, and security exclusively for your specific bloodline.
Oh, I see.
The text argues that because you draw a hard line that says, this is mine and my children's and not yours, you are fundamentally engaging in private ownership. You are protecting your own against the rest of the world.
Wow. So any boundary that creates an us versus them dynamic regarding resources is a barrier to the ideal state, even if us includes your kids?
Yes, the text demands a pure collective. The moment you prioritize your genetic offspring's inheritance over a stranger's well-being, the text categorizes your behavior as capitalist and individualistic.
Which means the text has to make some intense decisions about who actually belongs in which system. Like, there is no gray area here at all.
None whatsoever.
The categorization of human nature is just a harsh binary. According to the source, individual life, that independent way of living, is suited for people who are selfish, barbarous, ignorant, narrow-minded, insidious, jealous, and resentful.
I mean, the list is aggressive.
It really is.
It goes on to state that if a person has bad habits, they belong in an individual life. The collective life, conversely, is reserved exclusively for the civilized, the well-educated, the open-minded, the kind, and the merciful.
It's almost like a spiritual sorting hat, but instead of Gryffindor or Slytherin, you're being sorted by your ability to share a kitchen and abandon your ego.
That is a brilliant analogy. And it frames it not as a place you go to become a better person, but a place you earn the right to inhabit once you already are one.
Right. Instead of just sorting people based on personality traits, it treats the ego like a muscle.
How so?
Well, living an individual life is like floating in zero gravity, right?
Yeah.
Your communal muscles atrophy because you only ever have to lift your own weight and cater to your own
Oh,
preferences.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and collective living is the high gravity environment that forces that muscle to work, but you need a certain baseline of spiritual strength just to survive the gravity.
And that mechanism is central to the text's philosophy. The text isn't claiming the collective will magically fix a deeply selfish person. It claims the selfish person is currently only fit for the individual life.
Because the mechanics of the collective would crush them.
Precisely. They wouldn't be able to handle it.
Okay, so if we assume someone has that baseline level of inner civilization, the text lays out 8 specific aspects of why the collective is superior for daily living. But, I mean, from a modern Western perspective, giving up all private property and autonomy sounds incredibly stressful.
It does sound like a nightmare for a lot of people.
Right. So how does the text logically argue that this is better?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the text completely inverts the modern assumption about autonomy. Like, we usually equate independence with freedom.
Sure, nobody telling you what to do.
Exactly. But the text argues that communal living actually offers greater freedom by removing the existential dread of survival.
Okay, let's dig into the mechanics of that. How does giving up your own private space reduce existential dread?
It comes down to 2 primary mechanisms the text identifies. The sharing of weal and woe, which basically means good times and bad times, and the division of labor.
Okay, sharing the good and the bad.
Right. Consider the pressure of individual life. If you live alone and you lose your job, you might lose your house. If your car breaks down, your savings vanish.
Yeah, you carry the entire weight of your survival.
You're the CEO of your own existence. You have to be the breadwinner, the chef, the mechanic, the therapist, and the security guard.
That is exhausting just to list.
It is. And the text points out that this isolation naturally leads to anxiety, fear, and depression. In a collective, the woe is distributed.
So if you get sick, the community's resources absorb the impact.
Exactly. The existential threat of personal ruin is removed. Because the heavy lifting of survival is diffused among the group, the individual feels far less pressure.
And I guess the division of labor means you aren't spending your evenings doing laundry and meal prep after working an 8-hour shift.
Right. Aspect number 5 explicitly states that this division gives members significantly more leisure time for entertainment and personal cultivation.
Because everyone is specializing in what they do best for the community.
Exactly. So the overall efficiency skyrockets.
I can see how that drastically reduces the monotony of life. Like if you're working from home in an individualistic setup, ordering groceries online, you can go days without a meaningful interaction.
Yeah, the text actually highlights that isolation as a critical flaw, stating collective life is simply more colorful and less tedious.
Okay, but what about the social friction?
Well, aspect number 6 adds this counterintuitive point about social dynamics. It argues that because there is constant communication and a shared baseline of resources, people actually have fewer restrictions and checks against each other.
Huh. That is hard to wrap my head around. Usually we think of other people as the primary source of restrictions on our freedom.
Right, like fighting over the thermostat.
Exactly. You have to compromise on what to watch, what to eat, when to sleep.
But the text argues that those compromises are petty compared to the restrictions imposed by debt, isolated labor, and the fear of poverty.
Oh, wow. I see.
Yeah, when you are perfectly aligned with a group, the group's collective energy handles the survival baseline, completely freeing your mind to pursue higher spiritual or recreational goals.
Without checking your bank account first.
Exactly.
That really reframes independence from a triumph of adulthood into this heavy, isolating burden. But, the text doesn't just stop at making a sociological argument for why communes are a more efficient way to manage chores and reduce stress. The stakes escalate from earthly benefits to a cosmic level.
Oh, absolutely. The entire framework transitions from a lifestyle philosophy into literal theological imperative.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting. The text brings up a very famous biblical quote from Jesus Christ, the one warning that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right. Traditionally, that verse is interpreted as a straightforward warning against the corrupting nature of material wealth. The idea being that money becomes an idol that distracts from God.
The standard reading is that having too much stuff anchors you to the earth. But Shuif completely reframes the mechanics of this verse.
It really does.
The source argues that the material wealth itself isn't the physical barrier blocking the rich man from paradise. The reason the rich man cannot enter heaven is because the rich man is inherently unwilling to lead a collective life.
It completely redefines the rich person's fundamental flaw. It is not the gold in their pocket. It is their structural inability to share their happiness and wealth equally with others.
And the internal logic used to back this up is fascinating. The text states that the heavenly kingdom is a collective space.
Right. Heaven operates as a collective life, not an individual life.
There are no rich people or poor people in heaven, no private estates, no hidden bank accounts.
So if you define heaven as an environment of absolute unhindered sharing, then a person whose entire identity and sense of security is tied to private ownership is fundamentally incompatible with that environment.
Right. So if a billionaire gets to heaven and is told he has to share a room and sweep the golden streets alongside everyone else,
He would experience heaven as a loss of status.
he would hate it. Refusing to share automatically disqualifies you because you just wouldn't survive the atmosphere.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals how Lifechanyuan synthesizes multiple major worldviews.
Oh, so.
The movement explicitly claims that its cultivation is conducted completely in accordance with the teachings of Jesus Christ, Buddha Sakyamuni, and the celestial being Lao Tzu.
Wow. So it pulls the concepts of charity from Christianity, the dissolution of the ego from Buddhism, and the natural harmony of Taoism, and weaves them all into this singular metric of collectivism.
Exactly.
But how does the text explain the physical reality of a soul? Because it uses a very specific term for this.
Yes, the text introduces the concept of the non-material structure of life.
What actually is that? Like, how does a structure that is non-material operate?
You can visualize it as the architectural blueprint of a person's consciousness. The text posits that every thought, every attachment, and every habit shapes this structure.
So how does it become flawed versus perfect? Is it the act of hoarding wealth that damages it, or the intention behind it?
It is the attachment itself. Every time you declare this is mine or act out of jealousy or selfishness, you create a rigid, heavy node in your non-material structure.
Oh, I see.
The more rigid and isolated your blueprint becomes, the more flawed it is. A perfect non-material structure, according to the text, is fluid, unattached, and naturally possesses a profound passion for the collective.
So a flawless consciousness naturally gravitates toward communism, using the text's definition of the word.
Correct. The flaw is the anchor. The individual life literally induces selfishness, making the non-material structure heavy and unable to ascend to higher-level life spaces.
So you physically cannot reach heaven if your non-material structure is too rigid to blend with others.
Right.
That implies your preference for living alone, or, your annoyance when someone uses your coffee mug isn't just a quirky personality trait.
No, not at all.
It is a symptom of a structural defect in your consciousness.
Within Jiufeng's paradigm, individual independence is literally a disease. The collective life is the only cure, and it's the necessary road that leads to spiritual elevation.
Which brings us to the physical implementation of this. Because we aren't just discussing abstract theology here. The text outlines a literal place on earth to practice this.
Right. It introduces the concept of the second home, also referred to as the new oasis for life.
And this is the physical community where the theories of Lifechanyuan are tested and lived out daily.
Yes, it is the earthly laboratory for preparing the non-material structure for heaven.
So what does this all mean for someone actually trying to join? I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a listener who reads the brochures, likes the idea of sharing weal and woe, and wants to escape the anxiety of modern capitalism.
Sounds appealing to a lot of people.
Right. You pack your bags, give away your property, and head to the second home. What happens when you walk through the doors? Because despite the heavy emphasis on mercy and kindness, the text makes it clear this utopia is fiercely exclusive.
It is entirely conditional. The text issues strict warnings that not everyone is qualified to enter, nor does everyone meet the conditions to survive the lifestyle.
The elimination process is where the internal logic of the text faces its biggest stress test, I think.
I agree.
It states that if you haven't been adequately influenced by their values, you will be swiftly eliminated from the community. And the list of who gets eliminated is intense. Anyone selfish, arrogant, irrational, or narrow-minded.
It also explicitly includes people who are dishonest, ill-bred, or what the text translates as faulty, specifically noting those who are mentally and psychologically handicapped.
Yeah, we need to pause and look at that contradiction.
It's a glaring one.
The text spends pages praising the civilized, the merciful, and the kind. It claims the collective shares the burden of the weak. Yet, it explicitly states that psychologically handicapped or vulnerable people are eliminated.
Yeah.
How does the text's internal logic reconcile being a merciful sanctuary while outright rejecting people who need the most help?
Well, it reconciles it by leaning on the physics of the non-material structure we discussed earlier. The text does not view the elimination as a malicious punishment. It views it as an unavoidable structural incompatibility.
Oh, like a body rejecting an organ transplant that doesn't match the blood type.
Precisely in that vein. The text uses a very vital phrase. It says, these individuals cannot put up with the bondage of the collective atmosphere.
The bondage of the collective atmosphere. That phrasing is incredible because earlier the text argued that the collective provides ultimate freedom, but here it admits that the exact same atmosphere acts as a crushing constraint.
Because freedom is relative to the shape of your consciousness.
Okay, explain that.
For the unselfish person with a fluid, non-material structure, the collective is pure freedom because they have no ego to protect. But for a person who is rigid, arrogant, or psychologically unable to adapt to constant seamless sharing, the communal environment feels like intolerable bondage.
The expectation of having no private space, no personal resources, and constantly submitting to the group will basically suffocate a selfish ego.
Right, so the community eliminates them because mathematically their presence disrupts the harmony, and the individual themselves is suffering under the weight of the collective rules anyway.
Wow. Well, this raises an important question. If I am inside the second home, how do I actually prove my spiritual worth?
What do you mean?
Like, is there a curriculum? If I memorize the teachings of Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu, do I get to stay?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Intellectual knowledge is entirely insufficient. The text explicitly states that having a glib tongue or putting on a good show of being spiritual means nothing.
You can't debate your way into heaven.
You cannot. The text establishes an ultimate touchstone, the singular truest test of your self-refinement.
And what is that?
That test is simply whether you can smoothly and harmoniously blend into the collective life without generating friction.
It is entirely about the inner mind's reaction to sharing. It says, if you love the collective from the bottom of your heart and can blend in without major emotional or psychological obstacles, your cultivation is successful.
Right. The environment itself is the test. Your daily interactions, your willingness to do chores without resentment, your ability to share a meal without calculating who got the bigger portion.
All those micro-interactions reveal the true shape of your non-material structure.
Exactly.
And if you can't blend in, like if you find yourself constantly frustrated by the lack of privacy or annoyed by the group's decisions,
the text is blunt. If you cannot smoothly blend in, you have not gotten anywhere in your spiritual journey. It even suggests you have been led astray.
meaning all your other spiritual practices, your meditation, your prayers, your charity work, they are rendered void if you fundamentally demand to maintain your own private, individual life.
Yes. It places the ability to live collectively above all other religious rituals. The collective is the ultimate, non-negotiable metric.
Wow. Okay, as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's look at the entire narrative we've unpacked here today. Schiffing's text presents a worldview that completely dismantles the modern Western ideal.
It really tears it down to the studs.
Yeah. Collective living, surrendering resources, private space, and individual autonomy isn't just a strategy for lowering your rent or building an intentional community. It is the literal practice of getting used to heaven.
Right, and individual independence is diagnosed as a spiritual defect. The ultimate goal of human existence, according to Lifechanyuan, is to eradicate that defect and achieve a perfect, fluid, non-material structure capable of existing in an environment of absolute sharing.
The text actually challenges the reader to verify this using their own spiritual perception. It asks you to check these concepts against your own heart. So as you move through your day, I challenge you to look inward. Notice your own instincts.
That's a great exercise.
When you crave privacy, when you feel protective over your bank account, or when you get defensive about your personal space, do those instincts align with the text's definition of a flawed, selfish structure? Or do you genuinely possess the capacity to dissolve your ego into a perfect collective?
It requires a brutal level of self-honesty to answer that.
Mhm.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, one that pushes the implications of this text to its absolute limit.
Okay, lay it on us.
The source insists we must build the habit of heavenly life here on earth to prepare for the afterlife. But if the heavenly kingdom is defined as a reality with absolutely zero individuality, absolute sharing, and the total dissolution of the independent mind,
Yeah.
will the average modern person actually experience that existence as a paradise? Or would surviving heaven require the complete and utter destruction of everything we currently consider the self?